Hello everyone, welcome back to the little video series brought to you by the Friends of the Wendon Road Cemetery. With Remembrance Sunday coming up, I wanted this next part of Bridgwater and the Sea to look at the story of just one mariner of the Royal Navy in the First World War. This is the story of Petty Officer James Adams, just one story of thousands of that war, but one close to home. So James was born on the 3rd of June 1883 at Thurloxton, just south of Bridgwater. His mother was 28-year-old Eliza Adams, maiden name Bird. His father was Robert Adams, who worked as a farm labourer. Little James was baptised a month later in St Giles Church, Thurloxton, and he had an older brother and would later have two younger brothers and two younger sisters. By 1891, the family had moved to Huntworth, and by 1901 we learn that 17-year-old James had taken up employment as a brick and tile worker. There were 4 brickyards between Huntworth and Bridgwater, just on the west side of the river alone, so there was lots of work for a young man. We can probably make an informed guess that James, among other jobs in the brickyards, was employed to shovel coal into the great kilns. Tremendous heat was needed to bake the clay bricks, which required huge quantities of coal, all of which had to be shipped to Bridgwater from South Wales. All of this coal had to be fed into the kilns, single shovel by single shovel. However, at the age of 22, James decided he'd had enough of that and wanted to pack it in, so he enlisted in the Royal Navy on the 13th of November 1905. Unfortunately, we don't have any photographs of James. If you do know of any, do let us know. But we learned from his service papers that he was 5 feet 5.5 inches tall, had dark hair, brown eyes, and a fresh complexion. If he was hoping to have a change in work, he may have been disappointed, as he was made a stoker, i.e. his job was to shovel coal to feed the engines of the Navy's warships. However, at least, in almost every other way, this new career was an improvement on his life in the brickyards. The brickyards were precarious employment, and they tended to lay off most of their staff in difficult periods and over the winter, whereas the Navy would guarantee not only fixed, secure, long-term pay for doing the same job, but better pay as well. You get to travel the world, and you can see from this poster of 1913, encouraging recruits to the Navy, you'll get several other benefits, including a nice uniform, respect, sports, and even, oddly, rickshaw rides. The reality, however, was much less glossy than this, though, and you can see from these photographs of Navy stokers that it was filthy hard work, but at least it was better than the brickyards. We learn from James's service papers that he trained at the Royal Navy shore-based establishment at Devonport, which was for stokers, which was called HMS Vivid II. After training, the first ship he was assigned to was HMS Victorious in August 1906, which was part of the Atlantic Fleet, and James was one of a crew of 672. His next assignment was to HMS Ramillies in July 1907, part of a reduced crew as the ship was in partial reserve. He served on her until the end of the year, before going back on shore to Vivid II. James then seems to have spent most of 1908 out in Hong Kong as part of the China Squadron aboard HMS Amphirite, at least until October 1908. In early 1909 he served aboard HMS Monmouth, again part of the China Squadron, until March 1910, when he then transferred to HMS Andromeda and back to home waters before returning to HMS Vivid II. In August 1910, he started serving on his smallest ship yet, HMS Halcyon, a torpedo gunboat, which had a crew of only 120. This would be his longest posting so far, extending for 3 years. During this period, in July 1911, he found the time to get married, in Bridgwater, to 26-year-old Eliza Emma Seller, and they set up home at 4 Halesleigh Road. Eliza Emma was recorded on the census for that year as working as a servant of Alfred Ernest Manship, an auctioneer of Haygrove, and his wife Emma Dorothy. James's time off would have been short though, and he would have been required to return to duty as soon as possible. In the following year, November 1912, James was promoted to leading stoker. He then returned to Vivid II for retraining, and in January 1914 he attended the mechanics training establishment HMS Indus until May 1914. When the First World War broke out, he had recently been assigned to HMS Cornwall, a medium-sized cruiser-type warship. James wrote 2 accounts of his service in the early part of the war, one in a letter to his parents, another as a proper account for the Bridgwater Mercury. And I've merged these 2 together here to tell a more coherent story, but you can read the full separate versions for yourself in our book Bridgwater and the First World War, the link in the description below. We left her on August 2nd and took up our station off the South American coast. We set the sea well to the north on the Pacific side of South America, but did not fall in with any enemy ships. We proceeded to go south, and whilst doing so encountered an Italian mail boat. We signalled her to stop, but she took no notice and we gave chase. We put a couple of shots across her bows and she heaved to. She had a number of German reservists and an Austrian of high rank on board. These we took off and later transshipped them to the Highflyer, who took them to Gibraltar. It was this incident that saved us the same fate as the Monmouth and Good Hope. Now here James is referring to HMS Monmouth, which is the same ship he had previously served on in 1909. She had been sunk on the 1st of November 1914 at the Battle of Coronel off the coast of Chile. 5 medium-sized German warships went into battle against 2 older British warships of the same size and 2 small British ships, leading to the first defeat of a British naval force since the Napoleonic Wars over 100 years before. For only 3 wounded, the Germans had sunk 3 British ships, leaving 1,660 mariners dead. In response to this, the Royal Navy dispatched a powerful fleet to destroy this German threat to British shipping in the Atlantic. The German fleet was tricked into attacking Port Stanley on the Falkland Islands, thinking it to be undefended, where it met the Navy ships, the Cornwall being among the number. And Adams continues his story. We worked around to the Falkland Islands, where we were joined by the battle cruisers Inflexible and Invincible. We were in the harbour of Port Stanley on December 8th when von Spey's squadron was sighted. I heard it said that it was the little daughter of a lookout man who first saw the German ships. They had a regular lookout kept on the hill over the harbour, and the girl was looking through her father's telescope. She said, "Daddy, there's some warships over there." The man looked and saw that it was German vessels, although they were not flying any flag. He signalled to our ships, and we soon knew that there was prospect of going into action. As a matter of fact, we had a part of our engine dismantled, but we soon put it together again. Admiral Sturdy, that's the British admiral, sent the Kent out, and the Germans saw her, and von Spey evidently thought he had an easy job on once again, and he, so we are told, signalled to his ships to close in and engage the enemy, saying he would sink the lot and devastate the islands. I expect he had a different tale to tell when he saw our 2 big ones, Invincible and Inflexible, come into view. Directly they saw the battle cruisers, the German squadron went as fast as they could. It was about 7 in the morning and the Germans had 40 miles start. They made north and we after them. Everybody was excited. It was just like the excitement at a football match. The sailors crowded on to the highest points of the ship to see the chase. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon we got close enough to engage the Germans. The Invincible and the Inflexible turned on the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, and the light cruisers tackled Leipzig, Nuremberg and Dresden, which were making off in the opposite direction. We in the stokehold were stoking like mad. The old Cornwall had never done more than 23 knots before, but we fired her up that she exceeded 25. Our ship paid most attention to the Leipzig and occasionally gave the Nuremberg a smash. We were hit several times, but we had very few casualties. I had a slight splinter in my leg, but it was nothing. We eventually had the Leipzig set, and towards the end there were flames 200 feet high springing up from her. She reeled a little, and then went up on end and sunk. We had several shells strike our vessel, but the only one killed was our canary. Whilst up north, some English people had given us a black goat and a canary as pets for the ship, but in the excitement of going into action we forgot to move our little bird, and a shell which struck the galley not only made ribbons of the officers' coats, but carried away cage and bird. We started chasing them at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we got into gunfire range at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and at 9 o'clock 4 of them were sunk. The one that we sunk went down all on fire. She had 2 of her funnels blown away and mast, and she was burning like matchwood. The Germans that we picked up were only 4, 1 officer and 3 men, and they said they'd never knew that iron would burn. And they said that nearly every man was scorched to death before the ship sunk. It was horrible for them, and it would have been the same with us if we never had better men and better guns. Yet we sunk about 3,000 German sailors on the 4 ships. We had our revenge for their sinking the Monmouth and Good Hope. The next morning we heard that the Kent had sent Nuremberg to the bottom. Thus of the enemy's powerful squadron, 4 cruisers, 2 colliers and a provision ship were sunk. The Dresden got away, but she was so badly hit about that a lot of our men firmly believed that she too later must have gone down. After the victory, Admiral Sturdy came aboard the Cornwall and thanked all of us. He said he should like to shake hands with every man. He especially praised up the engine room staff and the stokers, and said, "But for our splendid work, we should never have caught the Germans." It is impossible for the war to last much longer, as the Germans are getting very short of food and ammunition, so the old Kaiser is beginning to see the red light now. He has nearly had his run out. They have only got a few ships at large now. And so, with a wounded knee, James had survived his first full battle at sea. In June 1917, James was assigned to a brand new destroyer, the HMS Valkyrie, upon her completion. Valkyrie was smaller than the Cornwall, but a very useful ship for the Navy for patrols, escort and small jobs. This would prove a change for Adams, as the Valkyrie was powered by oil rather than coal, so there would be no more hard shoveling. Valkyrie was part of Harwichford, of lighter, faster ships to provide scouting, patrols and raids along the English Channel. On the 22nd of December 1917, Valkyrie was one of 8 destroyers escorting a convoy from the Dutch coast. She struck a sea mine at 10:15 in the evening on the 22nd of December. Thick fog hampered the rescue effort, although the Valkyrie remained afloat and was eventually towed to safety by HMS Sylph. At 3:15 in the morning, HMS Torrent was manoeuvring to pick up men seen in the water, but she also struck a mine and she broke in two and sank quickly, such that only 7 men survived from a crew of 105. HMS Surprise and HMS Tornado were likewise struck by mines that day, with heavy loss of life. Adams was killed immediately as a result of the explosion on the Valkyrie, along with 20 other men. James's body was returned to Bridgwater and buried in the Wendon Road Cemetery, which was at the end of the road where he and his wife had made their home. His wife now left a widow. They had no children. You can visit James's grave in the cemetery where he rests alone. James's widow, Eliza Emma, was awarded a pension. She married a Leslie A. Duckham after the war in 1920 and moved to Gloucestershire. The Valkyrie was repaired and remained in service in the Royal Navy until 1936. So, on the 11th of November this year, remember, along with everyone else, James Adams, the boy from Huntworth, who spent most of his life shovelling coal, who died at sea in December 1917. So, I'll leave it there. I'll leave you with these images of the recent work carried out by the Friends volunteers in the cemetery to tidy it up as the weather slowly closes in. As always, you can support the Friends by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and becoming a member on our website or buying one of our books. Next time, we'll be looking at the Merchants of Bridgwater, and until then, wishing you all the best.